I always thought being considerate, patient, and thoughtful was what made me a good partner. My fiancée, Claire, had often told me she appreciated my kindness. But I didn't realize how quickly kindness could become a liability. It started with an offhand comment during one of our planning sessions. We were sitting in her apartment, going over the guest list for our wedding. She looked at me, fiddling with the napkin designs, and said, "Jake, my friends, they think you're too nice. They say I need someone with more edge. Someone exciting." I blinked, trying to process what she had just said. Too nice? I thought I was exactly the kind of person she wanted. The one who remembered her favorite coffee order, who stayed up late making sure she was okay. The one who never let a weekend go by without a small surprise. Then she said it, the part that hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I think I need a break. Maybe date a bad boy for a little while. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just leaned back and said, quietly, "Okay, I'll be bad." The room fell silent, Claire's eyes wide, searching for some hint that I was joking. I wasn't. That was when I realized. Sometimes being too good leaves no space for respect, no space for desire. You can be perfect on paper, but in the eyes of someone else, perfect can be boring. Over the next few days, I started thinking carefully about what being bad really meant. I didn't need to act reckless or cruel. No, I had to make a point without compromising my dignity. I canceled the venue. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed her to understand what she risked walking away from. Then I called the caterer and explained I couldn't keep the reservation. Finally, the honeymoon arrangements, every detail meticulously planned, were quietly undone. I didn't tell her. I wanted her reaction to be genuine, to see clearly what she had taken for granted. 2 days before the wedding, my phone rang. The caller ID read Claire. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't answer immediately. When I finally did, her voice came out shaky. Panicked. "Jake, what's happening? The venue, the caterer, the honeymoon." I thought everything was set. I stayed calm. The quiet in my tone contrasted sharply with the chaos in hers. "Claire, I did exactly what you said you wanted. I was too nice. I was boring. So I decided to be bad." She gasped. There was a pause. Then the edge in her voice softened slightly. You can't just... This isn't a joke." I let her panic roll over me, unshaken. The truth was, nothing about this was impulsive or cruel. It was a mirror she hadn't expected to see. If you're enjoying this story and want it to reach more people, hit the like button. Let others see the lesson here too. I remembered the first time we met years ago at a mutual friend's dinner party. She was laughing at some silly joke, the kind that makes a room feel brighter. I was drawn to that, to her energy. I thought that energy was enough to carry us through anything. But somewhere along the way, her admiration for my steadiness turned into disappointment. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and frantic texts from Claire's friends. They were shocked, of course. They hadn't thought she would ever truly face the consequences of her words. But I had no interest in arguing, just in showing that my patience, my respect, my kindness, were not to be taken lightly. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have handled a situation like this differently? I'm curious what this story makes you think. By the evening, Claire had arrived at my apartment, visibly shaken. I let her in. She looked around at the quiet, empty rooms, devoid of the decorations and preparations that had once filled them. I don't understand. How could you cancel everything?" she whispered. I met her gaze directly. "I understood exactly what you meant when you said I was too nice. So I decided to show you what happens when too nice meets consequences." There was a long silence, the kind that fills a room with tension, the kind that tests the limits of patience and respect. She shifted uncomfortably, realizing for the first time that my love wasn't something she could manipulate or discard lightly. I thought about all the small compromises I had made over the years, the weekends rearranged, the little surprises, the quiet support. Every act of thoughtfulness had been a thread connecting us. But when she asked for excitement over loyalty, she failed to see the value of what I had already given. Type the word respect in the comments if you think relationships should be built on mutual appreciation, not thrill-seeking. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to make threats. My actions spoke louder than any argument. And as the night wore on, I watched Claire shift from panic to contemplation, the first crack of awareness forming in her eyes. By the time she left, the weight of the situation had settled between us. We were no longer planning a wedding, we were facing a reckoning. She had underestimated what she had in front of her, and I had chosen to show her the consequences of that underestimation in the calmest, most controlled way possible. The next morning, I woke up to a series of frantic messages. Claire's tone had shifted from panic to pleading, but I didn't respond immediately. I needed her to fully understand that this wasn't about petty revenge. It was about awareness. Being too nice isn't weakness, but it isn't invisible either. She finally called. This time, her voice cracked, not with anger, but with genuine fear. "Jake, I know I messed up. Please, can we talk?" I let out a slow breath. "Claire, we can talk. But understand this, the wedding we were planning? It's over. I wanted you to see what happens when words are taken lightly." Her silence on the line was telling. She hadn't realized the power of her own demands until they collided with my actions. Share this story with someone who needs to understand the difference between thrill and loyalty in relationships. It's an important lesson in respect and boundaries. We met in the small cafe near my apartment later that afternoon. Claire's hands were wrapped around a coffee cup, the steam blurring her features. I studied her carefully. This was the moment that would define whether we had a future, not just in love but in understanding. I wanted someone exciting, someone unpredictable. I thought, she trailed off. I cut in gently. You thought I wasn't enough because I was reliable, because I cared too much, not too little. That's what you wanted to escape. Her gaze fell to the table. She nodded, the first hint of vulnerability I had seen in days. I didn't realize. I just wanted something different. I leaned back, letting her words sink in. Sometimes the different people chase aren't better. They're just distractions. You wanted a bad boy, Claire. I showed you what it's like when the good one refuses to be taken for granted. There was a long pause. Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't begging. She was processing. And that, for me, was enough. Comment below with a word or phrase that captures how you would feel in this situation. Let's see how this story resonates with everyone's emotions. We spent the next hour talking, carefully navigating the mess that had been our plans. I didn't forgive everything immediately. I didn't have to, but I clarified boundaries, expectations, and respect. Her friends' opinions, her desire for excitement, none of that would ever dictate my worth again. The power of being too nice had never been clearer. It wasn't about control, manipulation, or ego. It was about self-respect and value. When Claire realized she couldn't manipulate that, panic became reflection. Chaos became clarity. Later that night, as I walked home, I thought about the irony. The very traits she once criticized, patience, kindness, loyalty, were what gave me the control in the situation. I didn't need to be reckless or cruel. I simply needed to show that I wouldn't be treated as an option, a thrill, or a placeholder. If this story makes you reflect on your own relationships, hit like, leave a comment answering, would you have acted the same as Jake? And don't forget to subscribe to follow more stories like this. Each one teaches lessons about respect, boundaries, and emotional intelligence. By the end of the week, Claire had started to understand. She called, not to beg, not to plead, but to talk with honesty. I misjudged you, Jake. I was caught up in what I thought I wanted. I see now. I smiled softly, because finally, the storm had calmed. It wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about punishment. It was about teaching. Teaching that love without respect, thrill without consideration, and desire without appreciation is meaningless. We didn't get back to the wedding plans immediately, and maybe we never would. That didn't matter. What mattered was the lesson had been delivered, crystal clear. I had been too nice. Yes, and that was my strength, not my weakness. It's funny how life works. Sometimes the right path isn't the flashy, exciting, or reckless one. Sometimes it's the quiet, unwavering, principled approach that demands recognition. And in that recognition, real respect is earned. Claire eventually admitted she had been wrong. She didn't need me to lecture her. My actions had spoken for me. And in that, there was clarity, there was power, and yes, there was even a strange sort of peace. That's what being bad really meant in the end. Not doing harm, not chasing revenge, but standing firm in who you are and refusing to be undervalued. And as I sip my coffee now, thinking back to the panic, the chaos, the canceled plans, I realize the lesson wasn't just for Claire. It was for anyone who doubts the power of kindness, patience, and unwavering self-respect. The kind of person who refuses to be taken lightly is far more dangerous than any bad boy chasing thrills ever could be.